Radi, I wanted to ask you, Sheikh Naim Qassam, the new Secretary General of Hezbollah, has declared Operation People of Might. There have been record numbers of attacks that Hezbollah has been conducting operations. And I wanted to ask you what the state of the resistance is right now in Lebanon, given the fact that the devastation continues. It's not as much in the news. We have a lot about Donald Trump and the US election, but I wanted to ask you your thoughts on what's happening with the resistance at this moment.
The resistance is resisting. It's always what we expect from the resistance is very different from what we expect from an organized army. The resistance is just preserving its stamina, ascending order of operations, of distances, and of kinds of missiles. I think we can break down the details of how the growth and how the momentum has been growing in the past few weeks and in the past year in general, while discussing the resistance. Now, speaking about Sheikh Naim Qasim, or the new emerging image of Hezbollah post Nasrallah, we are getting used to the organization rather than the icon. The organization has been here for decades. Lebanese people know it very well. They have practiced and experienced the resistance in different shapes and forms since the first time the Israelis actually invaded our country. So, for the first time in the history of this people, we have a resistance that could actually make drones, use these drones, target very important areas. And today, I think there was a maritime base they have been targeting. They have already targeted the Israeli Prime Minister. That there's no precedent. This is a first time thing. And also the rockets, the amount, the intensity, all of this, it is unprecedented in the history of the resistances. So Hezbollah is now emerging as an organization that not only could preserve itself in such a brutal war and continuous attacks. Today, I read some statistics that the amount of bombings and the intensity and the frequency that has been used in the past month in Beirut hasn't been precedented, not even in Gaza during this war. So in front of all this kind of attack, you have a Hezbollah that is not only healthy, it is actually thriving and ascending in all its operations. We have Elijah with us, and he's usually my source for these kinds of insights. So having him, I feel kind of embarrassed to speak now.
Elijah, well, Radi, I think that was an incredible summary of what's happening. And Elijah, perhaps you can get into some of the details because as Donald Trump was being elected in the United States, Hezbollah was conducting what many have called a record breaking amount of strikes into Israel using new ballistic missile, larger and more powerful than before. And I'm curious if you could give the audience an understanding of what Hezbollah has been doing, how it's been able to conduct this kind of onslaught amid what Radi was referencing, this massive devastation Israel is trying to impose on the people of Lebanon. And yet Hezbollah persists. You have said that Hezbollah has actually defeated Israel militarily. Help the audience understand how.
I'm going to start with the end. Why Hezbollah has defeated Israel militarily is because there are 5 divisions along the Lebanese borders that is between 70 to 80,000 men. And after more than 5 weeks, they are unable to remain in any position in the south of Lebanon. Therefore, they did not take any static position or high ground on any hill, but they have managed to destroy many villages. That is not a military victory. But the mere fact that they are incapable of remaining on the ground, they've lost the war. And they will continue destroying. They can win the war if they can achieve their objective. So far, we have seen the Israelis attempting to move not only the paratroopers and the commanders' forces, but they try to push the armored divisions. And they have 2 armored divisions along the borders. And every time they try to break into the borders, they move just a few hundred meters and they have their tanks destroyed. This is the battle between laser-guided missiles, anti-tank missiles that can be fired from 8 kilometers and the incapability of the Israeli to neutralize these missiles and those who are carrying these missiles. Therefore, this is the dilemma of the Israelis to try and occupy 500 square kilometers that Israel said it would at the beginning of the war, thinking that Hezbollah has not been defeated. But then what you mentioned about the precision missile is really a game changer, and that needs a conversation per se.
Well, Ghadi, I know that you've been traveling a lot throughout Lebanon, doing a lot of journalism on the ground. Given what Elijah said about the military situation, what is the mood and how are people perceiving the state of not just the resistance, but also the overall situation that both Lebanon and the region finds itself in?
I have said this before, but I can't say it enough. I'm so proud to be Lebanese in this moment of history. I mean, tell me about the people. Tell me about any nation that has witnessed 1 million displaced in one day and could actually govern and manage the situation. I'm so proud of the society, of the community in Lebanon. The way that the impact has been absorbed, and the way the community is really reaching out to each other and accepting and actually supporting and maintaining relief with very minimal and scarce conditions, given that Lebanon is under siege. It's under an economic siege from the United States of America. And the actually the Israelis and the Americans prohibited the Iraqi planes and other planes to come holding relief, medical relief, and other kinds of relief. So Lebanon is a country in siege, but in that war and in such a displacement, you could see that the Lebanese society reached out to each other. And we're not in our best times. Obviously, we are witnessing a destructive war, but the society is holding on. You see, this resistant society have witnessed these kinds of wars time and again. The Israelis have been aggressive with us for decades, although this destruction is unfathomable. But you could see that people have witnessed this destroyed houses before, and then they have rebuilt it. So this gives them a sense of resilience, hope, and in a way, trust and confidence of the actual ground operations and the ground deterrence that is actually happening meanwhile in the southern Lebanon and in other areas of Lebanon.
Ghadi just mentioned the ground operation. I know that you mentioned the game-changing missile that Hezbollah is using. Could you also talk about, if you wanted to discuss this, but also the situation in this ground operation? I know Israel has thrown tens of thousands, upwards of 50,000 troops to try to invade southern Lebanon, and the reports are very grim. Even today, I believe you had reported, Elijah, that the IDF has just been handed heavy casualties. Could you describe the situation there? Where is it at, and how has it been going?
What the media is not reporting is what the Israelis are faced with in the south of Lebanon. Because as they try to advance, Hezbollah infantry, plus supported by the special forces, they are using rockets and they are engaging from close vicinity against the Israelis. This is why there are heavy casualties among the Israeli occupation forces. Now, we have seen yesterday the use of one of the most advanced missiles, that the Fatah 110. Hezbollah has most modern version, and it has also the Imad 1 and 2, it has Zulfikar, but the decision to start with an almost 9-meter missile and to show how this missile is brought from under the ground to the surface in an area that's wide enough to accommodate many other missiles, and to launch it by flooding the Israeli interception system simultaneously, it shows that there is a new decision to increase the attack. Now, throughout the decades, we've seen Hezbollah, the way they conduct the war, they don't go really showing every single capability they have. And by limiting themselves into drones and rockets and medium-range missiles in the last 12 and a half months, and now starting with a more precision missile, like the Fatah 110, it showed they have started a new decision, which is to decide and inflict more pain on the Israeli, but again, very measured, because it is, according to my experience, watching Hezbollah would not use a large quantity and number of missiles of the same kind to avoid driving the Israeli crazy and then start bombing everywhere in Lebanon. but they are injecting slowly but surely a new type of missile for the Israeli to get used to it, and then the number of these missiles will be increased. But also we've seen in the underground where Hezbollah showed us the Fateh 110, two pictures, the one of Sayyid Nasrallah and the one of Sayyid Ali Khamenei. Because the Fateh 110 is a game changer that cannot be used by Hezbollah without the approval of the supplier, in this case, Iran. And here we understand that Iran really wants to make sure that the Israeli and the Americans will understand that it is not going to give up on Hezbollah, regardless the cost of this war, exactly like Hezbollah and Iran did in Syria. So that is a strong message that came yesterday, indicating that the war that we're going to face, at least in the next 2 months, when Donald Trump is going to take office on the 20th of January. So we're going to see a different level of intensified battle in the south of Lebanon.
Yes, and Radi, there's been talks of diplomacy there, or an emphasis on talks, because when it comes to this conversation that's arisen about a potential ceasefire, how do you see this? Because it seems to me, of course, Israel has already rejected even just the notion and conversation of one happening. But what does it say that now we are hearing in the Western media talks of a potential ceasefire here? Of course, Israel has said in recent months, especially over the last month, that if its ground operation is going to wind down, it's because it's already done what it wanted to achieve. What do you say, though, about this ceasefire talk that's been going on in the Western media?
First of all, there's zero credibility for all that Western media and for that diplomacy. I think more than 1 year into the ongoing genocide in Gaza, we have had enough proof of what these ceasefire talks actually breed and how effective they are. What diplomacy are we speaking about? We have the Israelis actually today closing the only United Nations relief organization that is there for the millions of Palestinian refugees. I'm speaking about UNRWA. And they actually, in their Knesset, called it a terrorist organization. What diplomacy? There has been continuous impunity given by the West, and the Western media is complicit to the Israelis to carry on all kinds of crimes against humanity. And they actually took the footage, they televised it. We had the ICC probing into that. We had the ICJ ruling about that. And what happened? So do you really come and speak to people while they are being slaughtered about ceasefire talks and diplomacy, and led by whom? By the actual West that funds and fuels and arms and weaponizes this colony in the area. We do not really acknowledge any ceasefire talks, Danny. I don't really give them any attention at that point. We do look at them when the ceasefire talks are coming under the fire. So whatever talks would happen, they would come after the actual deterrence is proven on the ground. There is no diplomacy that cares about us. I think the world has already proven to the Palestinians, to the Lebanese, to the Syrians, and beforehand to the Iraqis that our lives don't matter. They have all kinds of proof of all kinds of war crimes against our children and our women and our prisoners of war. And what did they do about it? Did they care? So we have lost all kind of faith in law or humanity or diplomacy. What we really wait for is the actual ground deterrence that makes and places the actual realities. And because of Fatah and its likes, because of the drones and the deterrence, because of the ground heroes that are actually on the soil of Lebanon, pushing back the Israelis daily in every village in the southernmost areas of Lebanon. And only because of that the war would stop. This is how I see it.
Yes, and I'm glad you said this, Radi, because I wanted to then kick it back to you, Elijah, on this connection between the absolute brutality as well as the effectiveness of Israel and then the effectiveness of the resistance. Why would then the resistance even think about any kind of ceasefire when it comes to what's happening in Lebanon alone? Because we have this entire picture regionally that maybe you could speak to, which says not only could you never trust a ceasefire, but also the resistance has gotten stronger, and it's Israel that has been looking worse and worse on the military front. What do you say about that, Elijah?
Since 2006, there was no ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. There was a cessation of hostility. That was the deal to stop the war, which means that the war can restart anytime one of the two sides decides to start it. Now, why the resistance would want a ceasefire is because of the civilians. Israel has the air dominance, and it has all the supply in the world that it can receive from the Americans and the Germans. The strategic warehouses that belong to the United States in the Negev are at the disposal of Israel. The Americans supply the Israelis with more than 50,000 tons of explosives. No country in the world can go to war without counting the ammunition it has, at the exception of Israel, because it has an unlimited supply. And this is why we've seen the Israelis, when they want to send a message, they destroy 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 buildings, because they don't care. They have so many bombs that they use it. So this is why the resistance is concerned about the reconstruction and is concerned about its own people. And the Israelis showed at the beginning of the war in Gaza that they really don't care about the civilians, committing war crimes against humanity. And now the Israel is accused of intent of genocide, is under trial. It's because the Israelis are unaccountable. But on the other hand, the resistance care about the civilians. And this is why we have seen, for example, Hezbollah, because it has precision missiles and drone, is not firing against the civilians. And those who have been killed are a limited number that can be classified as collateral damage. On the contrary, on the Israeli side, they bomb indiscriminately any target they think of, or they want to inflict pain on the resistance. The first day Israel started the war against Lebanon, they bombed every single house they know about of a Hezbollah operative in his home with his family, killing him and the entire family, because the resistance is fighting the most immoral and unethical army in the world. But the resistance cares and understands the winter is coming and people need to seek refuge. As Ghadi said, there are more than 1,200,000 internally displaced people. They need a shelter. They need a place to live, and the reconstruction is going to take a few years. Therefore, the resistance is holding the gun in one hand and a deal in the other to say to Israel, we accept the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701 and nothing more, or we continue fighting, because civilians matter.